Hey Harmonizers, it's time for a Pretzel video where I'm going to show you guys her trail course from Pennsylvania and give you a real insight into how she was before our major accident that was completely life-changing for me. And I'll be going into more detail about that probably in next week's video, but wanted to get through some of this video footage from the horse show first and show you guys Pretzel. So like, look how patiently she waits while the judge gets ready and we get ready for the course to go. And then we get started with the course, and there is going to be some excitement when we get to that water box, but I want you to see how Pretzel goes so you get to understand her a little bit more and see how amazing her training has been up to this point. So look at her walking over the logs really nicely, and then we're going to get to these barrels where we have to trot, and this is meant to be a trot weave. We're supposed to trot right at the barrel. Pretzel's a little bit on the slow side. She's a little slow to get going, but I ask her to trot, and we do manage to get that trot happening to finish our weave. Now, each of these obstacles is scored, I believe, out of 10, and but they each have their own score. So the walking poles would have had its own score, the trot weave would have had its own score, and now we're doing the rope gate. And this is Pretzel's first ever rope gate. I'm going to explain a little bit more about how I came to ride in this competition because it was not entirely planned, or not even sort of planned. I was intending to do this competition in hand. So Pretzel had literally never done a rope gate before ever, but I've trained her on lots of different pieces that are relevant. So the backing up, the pivoting, all that stuff she kind of knows. And then here you can see I'm asking her to side pass. And I'm like, all right, we don't want to start a fight here. She doesn't know how to do that one-handed. So I toss the rope and she's fine and we walk away. Now we get to the water box. And it's kind of an intimidating looking water box because it's got this black tarp and there's water in it. And it's kind of a small box, so it makes it a little tricky. Now, what was really interesting, like there you can see she's sniffing, she's interested, she's going to try. But what was really interesting is we had the opportunity to walk around the arena and practice the obstacles that were set up. They were not set up in the exact way that the competition would be held, but there was stuff out there, and this black box was out there. And so I did everything in hand because I was thinking I would be competing in hand. And so she had walked this box. She was a little slow and skeptical to do the box from the ground, but I had her do it enough times that she felt pretty relaxed with it. And I knew that if we were doing the competition in hand, it would go really well. So I was really surprised that when we got to it ridden, just how much of a difference that made for her. Now, my experience riding her has been that mostly we're doing things that we've accomplished on the ground, and we haven't gotten to a place in our riding yet where I'm asking her to do obstacles for the very first time. And this was a hard one for her, and you can see she gets a little bit frustrated, she gets a little bit upset. She does this wiggling, she's done some backing up. Now, I'm not riding with spurs or a bit, I'm just riding in her halter. I'm allowing her to sniff it. I'm giving a little bit of suggestion to go, using a little bit of, rhythm in my body, a little bit of squeezes, and she's not doing anything super awful. So even though she's kind of saying, Lindsay, this is hard, I don't know if I want to do it with you on my back, I'm saying, like, you can do it. Like, we did this on the ground. You can do it. Like, this is going to be okay, and it's going to go all right. And she's like, I don't know if I can. And even with all of that thoughts going on about being a little bit uncomfortable and having to do something that's challenging, she's not doing anything dangerous or nasty. She's simply saying, this is hard, not sure, and she's making little attempts, but otherwise she just kind of backs up and kind of retries. See, lots of sniffs, and then she jumps across it. And even though she jumps across it, and technically I've never jumped her before, she doesn't do anything. She doesn't scoot away, she doesn't bolt, she doesn't buck, she doesn't do anything bad whatsoever. And because she had done it on the ground before, instead of moving on to the next obstacle, I thought, well, because you didn't touch it with your feet, let's now try again. Thinking that, normally when the horse goes to do it the second time, they do it a lot easier. So I thought it would be much quicker, but it was not. So instead it's like, okay, we're going to take our time with this again, and then we'll end up moving on. But I wanted her to try and realize that she needed to try a little bit harder. And if this was more of a training opportunity, I would have had her, stick with it until she actually put her feet in the box. But because this was a competition, I was already kind of taking advantage of the situation, asking her to do it for a second time. And the only reason why I did that is because I thought she had done it on the ground. Now that we jumped it in the saddle, like, let's try it again, and she might actually touch it with her feet. And she was not super impressed with the idea. She jumps it again, and I say, you know what, that's good enough. Let's move on to the next one. And we'll give that another try afterwards. Like, when the show is over, we'll see if we can come back into the arena and walk through it, which we definitely did. And I have saved that clip for the end of this video. You guys will see when I come back into the arena, one of the best things of this course. So that was an easy one, just picking up a piece of mail. She stands so quietly for that. And then it's a trot to the corner. She picked up her trot so nicely that time. And we come to the pylon where we do our halt. And this is a dismount. And so she does that really, really quietly. And so Pretzel has been trained walk trot. And this is our first riding competition. And she had not ridden off-site before this competition. The reason why that it ends up being a riding competition for me is there were, I believe, over 20 horses that were picked up for this competition, but fewer than 10, just less than 10, ended up actually coming to the competition. Originally, they were going to have a mix of youth, like a youth division and an adult division, but because there ended up being no youth, they changed it to a riding division and an in-hand division. So I wasn't sure about it. I was going to do just the in-hand because that's what we had practiced for. But then once I kind of saw what was expected in this riding class, I realized, okay, it's walk trot. And I thought, my horse does a lot of these obstacles really well already. And there's this little part here where you dismount, remount, do the it's almost like a big square pedestal that you walk across. And then you get on and you walk some obstacles. And I thought, you know what, this is actually probably pretty fair for Pretzel to try, because it's a lot of the stuff that we've already kind of worked on. And although it's new, it will be something that she could do. And when we had the practice in the arena before showtime, I hadn't made the decision to ride yet. So she literally had not ridden through any obstacles here. We'd only done in-hand practice. And so the practice I did riding was just out in the warm-up area. And she does all those obstacles really, really nicely, even though we had not had a chance to ride those already. And then this is a dismount part where we go into the trailer. So even though the water box was a real challenge for us, you can see that all the other obstacles really go pretty nicely for us. So we do end up winning this class as well. She did really, really well. And the interesting thing about an obstacle course is, even though you might have one bad obstacle in particular, it doesn't necessarily hurt your whole score, because you still have all of the individual things for your course as well. And she did a lot of those things really, really well. Tiny bit of a late trot on the weave, and maybe not as close to the gate for the rope gate as possible. But overall, look at how well she does all of those things. So you get to see her personality a little bit. And I think this is so important to share, because after my accident, Pretzel got a bit of a bad reputation, and people were a bit worried about her because, I had a fall where I fractured my head, and I ended up with my brain bleeds, and it's really, really bad. But it was not Pretzel's fault. Like, she's a greenly trained horse, and what was asked of her because of what the other competitor did was too intense for her. But she's not a bad horse at all. It was just a combination of bad events, and I'll be going into more detail about that later. The other thing that I want you to notice as I go through this now, this is after the competition was done, is I want you to notice the hat that I'm wearing. The hat is actually a helmet. It's a Western hat helmet. It's called a hell hat. And that's what I was wearing when the fall happened, and is now definitely broken and toast. One of the best things about this competition is that they allowed you to have this practice time. So when the competition class was over, the arena was free to come back in and readdress things with your horse if you wanted to. So here at the water box, Pretzel had a moment where she really started to back up a whole lot. So I spun her in a circle to be like, no, we're not backing up. This is like a forward motion thing. And I say, like, we can do this. And you can see I just give her her head. I let her play with the water. And she's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can totally walk through that. It's a little stressful. And because she walked through it and she made an effort, she's actually going to get a cookie now. Now, what's interesting, although this is, challenging for her, it's a scary looking water box. It's totally fair. But what you get to see is even though she had a stressful moment, something hard to do, she doesn't do anything nasty at all. There's like a little bit of slowness in her body language. Try not to be too upset about the swishing tail. Part of that could be frustration every now and again, but they have lots of these little bugs that we do not have at home. At my farm, we have virtually no bugs because we're at the top of a hill with sandy soil. So we have really well draining soil. And we don't really have a lot of bugs. So when we go other places, the horses do get extra swishy, even if we're not riding them. They're swishy because of the bugs. And you can see she does that and she walked through it so nicely. So I'm like, okay, we'll go on and we'll try something else. And that's just part of my training process is I don't like to drill horses. I like them to know, like, you have to try, you have to do your best. And then when they do, it's like, okay, you did awesome. Let's now move on. So I thought, you know what, let's try this gate again. And let's try, originally I came here with my left hand and I was like, okay, well, we'll do this. It makes it a back through gate instead of a forwards gate. So in the competition, we did it as a forwards gate. Pretzel has never done a backwards gate before. She's never done any type of gate with me before. But I've installed all of those buttons, the pivots, the backup, the sideways. Those are all things that she technically knows how to do. So I just break it into small steps. And then I always try to get rid of the rope sooner rather than later. I don't try to push them right next to the jump standard because I want to make sure they know it's not stressful. So I'm like, okay, like that was good enough considering that's your first back through gate. So we'll just leave it at that. So there, now that I dropped off the gate, I'm saying, okay, let's move over and we're going to try, now that we've gotten rid of the gate and we're not holding on to that piece of rope, we're going to position ourselves precisely how I would want you to stand. So I'm trying to show her what I want her to do. And I'm just picking up the rope again and making sure she understands that that's okay. It's nothing stressful to do. So I picked it up and put it back down. Now we're going to walk off and try another thing. So I go into my little weaving of the barrels and you can see she picks up her trot that time, no problem. Of course, slows to a walk and then picks it up, no problem again. She definitely tends to be a little bit more on the slower side. Doesn't matter if we're going towards home or away from home. She's just not in a hurry to go anywhere, which is great. She's just pretty slow about all of that. So here you can see I'm just making a little circle, a little redo. Just trying to make sure we get things a little smoother. She tends to slow down when she's unsure, which is totally okay. And here she's like, okay, can we be done? I feel like that was a good enough course. And I'm like, no, we're not done. So she does this little backing up thing. So all I do is politely ask, and then I turn her. If she starts to kind of go backwards a little too fast, I spin her in a little circle. Not to be mean, but just kind of show her like, that's not what I want you to do. And remember, she's not wearing a bit and I'm not wearing spurs. I don't have a crop or anything. And she's like, oh, okay, like can't do that. So then we go off in a little trot going this way as well. And she just tends to be a horse that's more on the slow, lazy side. And she kind of asks those questions like, do we really have to go and do more? And I'm like, we could go and do a little more. Having that confidence in her. So I'm just trying to build her up, make sure that we finish on a good note. And when I notice that something's really tricky for my horse, like there, how she was, when she was back at the other end of the arena and she was like, I don't want to do more. I thought, I need to ride you to the far end of the arena at the trot. And if you give me a good trot there, we're going to finish at the far end of the arena. So I don't push my horses to the point of, trying to do tons. I say, okay, thanks for the feedback that was hard. Now I'm going to reward you and tell you you did awesome. Hope you guys liked.
Remember to subscribe and check out harmonyhorsemanship.com for even more learning.